Everyone, Mike here with Hollows Eve DIY. Next on our list, we have the Lowe's Haunted Mansion Caretaker animatronic. There's going to be three things that I'll be doing to this one. One is having the arm and lantern continuously moving. From the time my display turns on until it turns off, I want to have his arm and lantern moving. Two is changing the light within the lantern to be a solid red light that it came with to a flame light. And then third is going to be having the head move with the movement of his arm and lantern. So I'm going to post this in a three-part series. The first part is going to be getting his uh, arm to move continuously. And I'm pretty excited about this one because I think it's going to be fairly simple and something pretty much everybody can do with a minimal tools required. So let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this control box. This also had the speaker that played the music, which I personally did not even like, so I have no problem getting rid of that. So we're going to take off the control box. There's 4 screws here, and then we're going to take off this stock motor and the connecting piece that is up here as well. And there's 4 screws that hold on this motor from underneath as well. So before I take out the screws to remove this stock motor, I'm going to disconnect this control rod here. So there is a C-clip up here that you're going to have to use a pair of needle nose pliers to pinch off, and then everything just slides right out. Okay, so here it is. That's what it looks like. Okay, so the C-clip is off. Now I'm just going to slide everything off of the arm right here. I'm going to set these pieces here aside so I don't lose them. So before you remove the stock motor, you're going to want to mark off where the shaft of the motor is so that you can make sure when you install the reindeer motor, you're about where you need to be to have the movement correct. So you can see here, I just took a little piece of blue painter's tape and marked it off, but you can just line up with a ruler about where the middle of the shaft is of the motor that's sticking out, and just mark off with either a marker, or you could use a little piece of tape like I did, just so that you could line up the shaft of the reindeer motor to be in the right position. Okay, we'll get the 4 screws underneath. And I'm just gonna snip this zip tie. This one up here as well. Once you snip all the zip ties off, you can remove the control box and the stock motor. Okay, so all of that is off, and now what I'm going to use to replace the stock motor is one of these reindeer motors. This does come with a stock control arm on it. This orange one I put on because I couldn't find the stock one, but I think the stock one would be sufficient. I like this motor because it's pretty similar in size to the stock one, and this motor is already made to be outdoors, so less of a worry during the Halloween season when it's going to be on display. And I think it'll have more than adequate power to move the arm back and forth. So I bought a bunch of these 4x6 wooden pieces from Amazon. I'm going to put the link to everything into this in the description. So I glued two of them together, and we're going to use this as the new base for the motor. So we'll have that as the base, and we'll attach our reindeer motor, and the control arm will line up right there and should be good to go. So for mounting this reindeer motor to the base plate, if you have a 3D printer, you can find files. I will post a link to it where you can print out attachments that will screw directly into the motor, and then we'll have two screws that would go down into the wood. I want to do this a little bit differently so that everybody, even if you don't have a 3D printer, can do this modification. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these 5/16 bolts. They're going to come through the bottom of the wood and go through these indents right over here. So it'll come through and it'll be in there like that. There's one on this side, there's another on this side, and when those are going through, it'll prevent the motor from moving back and forth, and then we'll secure it from the top, and that'll hold it in place so that it can move the arm back and forth. So before we get that reindeer motor mounted up, I'm just going to cut this base plate a little bit so it fits better. So I'm just going to lay it on top of these two brackets, and I'm just going to mark off where the outer bracket is and then cut it so it'll be a much better fit. Let me go ahead and mark it with a pencil. And so I'll cut that. Okay, much better fit there. And I'm going to mark off where the holes are from where the stock motor was mounted. And I'm going to reuse the stock screws, and I'll get this secured onto there. Okay, oops. Just going to hold this in place. Make sure it's squared up. And then just mark off underneath where the stock holes were. Okay. So you can see the markings here. So that's where I'm going to drill my holes for the screws. All right, so we got that screwed in there. The stock screws are a little bit long. They're sticking out just a little bit, but that's okay. It's not going to get in the way of our motor, so no issue there. So next thing I'm going to do is work on lining up the shaft of this motor to where I marked it off to where the stock shaft was, and that way we can then mark off where we need to drill our holes for the bolts to go through. Okay, so one thing when mounting this reindeer motor is you can't mount it this way where the indents are going to be on the right and left side. You're going to have to turn it to have those indents on the front and back side of the prop. If you have it going this way, you're not going to be able to get the bolts through because of the metal brackets. They get in the way. So you're going to have to mount it this way. And then what you're going to want to do is find that mark that you made where the shaft of the stock motor was, and use a ruler and just line up where you need the new shaft to be. All right, I think that's about it. Doesn't have to be perfect, but get it as close as possible. So right there is good. And then I'm just going to mark off where those indents are so I know where I need to put the bolts. Okay, not pretty, but basically got these squares here from where the indents were. And then I'm just going to draw an X in the square to get about where the middle is. Oops. And then that's about where I need the bolts to go through. All right, so I'm going to take this plate off now, get these 4 screws out, and drill my holes for the bolts. I'll need a 5/16 drill bit, and then we could get the motor mounted up. Before I drill the holes, I'm just going to use one of these center punches to mark off where I need them to go. If you don't have a center punch, you could use anything that has a sharp point. A nail would work fine. This is just going to ensure when you start drilling that the drill bit stays in place and the hole goes where you need it and the drill bit doesn't wander off. Okay, now I'll get my holes drilled. Okay, so we got our bolts going through our wooden mount here now, and we're ready to put the motor on. One thing I just want to mention is if you need to adjust how much of the bolt is sticking through the wooden plate so that the motor can sit flush, you can use 2 nuts on the bottom and adjust it for how much of the bolt will stick through. And now you'll see, let me adjust this here. This will sit on here and it sits nice and flush. And if we move over here, you can see that bolt going through the wooden plate, and the motor is not going to be going anywhere. Now from the top, I'm just going to use a couple zip ties to hold it down tight, and then we can go ahead and attach the control arm. All right, I got my control arm here screwed back on to the motor, so we're just going to go ahead and attach the control arm for the arm with the lantern and reassemble this here. Put that on, and then I just need to get a washer and a bolt for the top. Washer. And then for the top, I'm going to be using a nylon nut so that it won't come loose as it's moving. Get that started, and I just gotta tighten it down, and then we could plug it in. Okay, so now everything is connected and installed, and we're ready to plug in the reindeer motor and see what the movement's like. So I really like this movement. It's a little bit slower, which I like. Um, since this is going to be on from the time my display turns on until it turns off, I'm really happy with this speed. And if the movement is off the way, if he's moving a little bit too left, a little bit too right, that control arm is adjustable. You just have to turn the pieces on the end and you can adjust the movement. But I think this turned out great. So next we will work on the light that's in the lantern.